After centuries of peace, the Galactic Armada's quest for expansion brought them to the farthest reaches of known space. A remote, forgotten world lay dormant, untouched for millennia. It seemed like another barren planet, devoid of life or history, but curiosity drove them deeper. In their arrogance, the Armada sought to extract resources and investigate any ancient secrets the planet might hold. Their exploration teams drilled into the planet's crust, hoping to find something of value, but what they uncovered was far worse than they ever imagined. The drill breached an ancient, sealed chamber. The ground trembled, and a low, guttural sound echoed through the tunnels. Dust and debris scattered as something stirred in the darkness. The Galactic Armada, with all its technological advancements and military might, was entirely unprepared. The Xenomorph Queen, ancient and monstrous, had been awakened from her slumber. Her brood, dormant until now, began to stir as well. An army of deadly, bioengineered creatures, bred for destruction, erupted from the depths of the planet. The Queen, towering over everything, unleashed a screech that rippled across the atmosphere. It was the sound of death, a harbinger of doom for anyone who stood in her way. The Armada's initial reaction was confusion. They had never seen anything like this. Their weapons, designed to subdue entire star systems, proved useless against the swarm. The Xenomorphs moved with terrifying speed and coordination, overwhelming the advanced soldiers with ease. Ships were torn apart, colonies destroyed in a matter of hours. The Queen, with her endless supply of brood, spread across the stars, seeking more worlds to consume. Within days, entire systems had fallen silent. Communications were lost, and panic began to set in across the galaxy. As reports of the Xenomorph invasion reached Earth, humanity watched in stunned silence. The devastation was beyond anything they had witnessed in their history. Earth's defenses, though formidable, were still no match for the sheer number of xenomorphs spreading across the stars. The United Earth Defense Council convened in a hastily arranged meeting, their faces grim as they reviewed the intelligence coming in from the remnants of the Galactic Armada. The Queen's brood was growing, and it wouldn't be long before Earth was next in line. "We're not ready for this," one of the council members muttered under his breath. The room was thick with tension. Every option had been considered: conventional weaponry, nuclear strikes, even attempts at diplomacy, but nothing could stop the swarm. The xenomorphs were a force of nature, a plague with a singular goal: consume and destroy. "There's only one option left," an older, grizzled general said, his voice cutting through the murmurs. He paused for effect, letting the weight of his words sink in. "We need Godzilla." A hush fell over the room. The idea was as ancient as the creature itself. Godzilla, the protector of Earth, had been dormant for years, deep beneath the ocean. There were myths, stories passed down through generations, of how Godzilla had saved the planet from countless threats in the past. But waking him again was a gamble. The king of monsters was not a force to be controlled or commanded. He was raw, untamed power. "We have no choice," the general continued. "If we do nothing, Earth will fall. Godzilla is our last line of defense." With the council's reluctant agreement, the order was given. Across the world, teams mobilized to carry out the unprecedented task of awakening Godzilla. Deep-sea exploration vessels, military submarines, and scientists equipped with the most advanced technology humanity had ever developed descended into the ocean's depths. The currents were calm, but there was an undercurrent of tension. They all knew what was at stake. The water grew darker as the team descended further into the abyss. The sensors began to detect faint tremors, rhythmic and deep. They knew they were getting close. Godzilla's resting place was hidden in a massive underwater cavern, a natural fortress beneath the waves. It had been years since anyone had ventured this far. As they reached the cavern, a low, rumbling sound filled the air. The water vibrated around them, and then, in the distance, they saw it, a massive, hulking figure, lying still at the bottom of the ocean. Godzilla, ancient and powerful, was waiting. With a series of carefully calibrated signals, the team began the process of waking him. The waters around them churned violently as Godzilla stirred. His eyes, glowing faintly, opened. The beast rose slowly, his colossal form breaking through the ocean's surface. A roar echoed across the skies, louder and more fearsome than anything humanity had ever heard. Godzilla had returned. The world watched in awe and fear. Footage of the awakening spread across the globe, broadcast live to every corner of the planet. People stood in the streets, their eyes glued to the skies. For a moment, the threat of the Xenomorph invasion seemed distant. Godzilla, the protector of Earth, had risen once again, and for the first time in days, there was a flicker of hope. But time was running out. The Xenomorph Queen's brood was already moving closer, and the Queen herself was preparing for the final assault. Earth had only days, maybe hours, before the swarm descended upon them. The preparations to transport Godzilla into space began immediately. It was a feat of engineering that had never been attempted before, but humanity had no other choice. As the massive transport vessels began to assemble, Godzilla stood watch over the city, his eyes scanning the horizon. He could feel the danger, the threat to his domain. The battle ahead would be unlike any other he had faced, but Godzilla was ready. The king of monsters was always ready. With Godzilla awakened, Earth's hope rested on a single, monumental task: transporting the colossal beast into space. This had never been done before, and the risks were immense. The world's top scientists and engineers immediately began working around the clock to make it possible. They knew they had little time. The Xenomorph Queen's brood was devouring planets with frightening speed, and Earth was next. Every second counted. Massive transport ships were designed specifically for this mission, each equipped with reinforced containment fields strong enough to withstand Godzilla's sheer power. The process of lifting such an enormous creature out of the ocean and into space was daunting. Godzilla's size and energy were beyond anything humanity had ever handled, but this was no ordinary task, and Earth had no other choice. The world's best minds came together, driven by desperation and the instinct for survival. Godzilla, now standing on the coast, loomed over the city. His eyes, burning with primal energy, scanned the horizon. He seemed to understand what was happening, as though he knew the weight of the task ahead. The preparations were nearly complete. Massive harnesses and restraints were fitted onto him, securing his body for transport. The ground trembled with each step he took, but there was a strange calmness in his movements. He wasn't a mindless force of destruction. Godzilla was a protector, and he seemed aware that this time, the threat was far beyond anything Earth had ever faced. As the final preparations were made, the tension on Earth was palpable. People everywhere watched in awe as the transport vessels, larger than any structure humanity had ever built, hovered above Godzilla, ready to lift him from the planet's surface. There was no turning back now. The moment had come. A powerful hum filled the air as the containment fields activated. The atmosphere crackled with energy as the vessels locked onto Godzilla, their engines roaring to life. Slowly, the king of monsters began to rise. The sight was beyond imagination: Godzilla, an ancient creature of the earth, being lifted into the sky by human technology. The massive transport ships strained under the weight, their energy fields pulsating as they carried Godzilla higher and higher. The people of Earth watched in stunned silence. It was a moment that transcended fear or hope. It was the ultimate gamble, a fusion of humanity's resilience and the raw, elemental force of Godzilla. For the first time, humans and the ancient protector were truly united in their fight for survival. As Godzilla ascended beyond the clouds and into the cold expanse of space, the enormity of the task ahead became clear. Earth scientists had designed the containment fields to shield Godzilla from the harsh conditions of space, but no one knew how he would react once he was out there. Godzilla had always been tied to Earth's natural forces: the oceans, the land, the skies. Now, he was leaving his element entirely, to face a threat that was not of this world. The Galactic Armada, decimated and scattered by the Xenomorph Queen's brood, watched as Earth's plan unfolded. Their communication channels buzzed with disbelief. They had known of Godzilla through ancient legends and myths, but never had they imagined such a creature could be real, let alone brought into the battlefield. The surviving fleet captains, desperate and broken, sent their remaining forces to assist Earth. It was the last hope for everyone. As Godzilla entered space, his presence was a force unto itself. The sheer scale of him, even against the vastness of space, was a testament to his power. The Xenomorph Queen's brood had begun to move towards Earth, their hive ships casting long shadows across the stars. Thousands of xenomorphs, bred for destruction, swarmed through space like a plague. But now, they would face something beyond their comprehension. The first clash came swiftly. Godzilla, now fully in space, roared, a sound that reverberated through the vacuum, carried by the energy he emitted. His atomic breath, a force of pure destruction, ignited the darkness, cutting through the xenomorph swarm like a blade. The hive ships disintegrated under the onslaught, their organic forms no match for the raw power of the King of Monsters. The Galactic Armada's remnants rallied behind Godzilla, using their ships to distract and contain the xenomorph forces while Godzilla unleashed his fury. The battle spanned across star systems, with entire planets turned into battlegrounds. Godzilla's movements were slow but deliberate. Every swing of his tail, every pulse of his atomic breath, decimated the swarm. Yet, the xenomorphs kept coming, their numbers seemingly endless. The Xenomorph Queen, watching from her hive world, saw the destruction of her brood and felt something she had never experienced before: fear. This was no ordinary enemy. Godzilla wasn't just a creature of flesh and bone. He was a living embodiment of Earth's power, something far more dangerous than any weapon the Queen had encountered in her conquest of the galaxy. As the battle raged on, Godzilla's attacks grew more ferocious, but so did the xenomorph's adaptations. The brood began to swarm him, their sheer numbers overwhelming even his vast strength. They latched onto him, their acidic blood burning through his thick skin. For the first time, it seemed that even Godzilla might falter. But Earth wasn't alone in this fight. The Galactic Armada, inspired by Godzilla's relentless assault, launched coordinated strikes against the hive ships, targeting the Queen's forces with precision. They had learned from their failures, adapting their tactics to assist Godzilla in any way they could. For once, humanity and the Armada fought side by side, united in their desperation to survive. In the cold void of space, Godzilla unleashed his most devastating attack yet. Drawing on the energy around him, he released a massive pulse of atomic energy that ripped through the xenomorphs, obliterating entire swarms in an instant. The hive ships exploded in a brilliant cascade of light, their organic forms torn apart by the blast. But the Queen wasn't finished. Watching from her hive world, she realized that if she didn't act soon, her entire brood would be destroyed. She began to move, preparing for the final battle. Earth had won the first round, but the true fight was only just beginning. The Queen would not be defeated so easily. As Godzilla stood amidst the wreckage of the hive ships, his eyes turned towards the distant planet where the Xenomorph Queen awaited. The final battle was coming, and Earth's survival hung in the balance. The destruction of the Xenomorph brood in space was only the beginning. The Queen had watched her forces burn, her hive ships destroyed, but she wasn't defeated. Far from it. From her lair, she sent a signal, a high-pitched, almost imperceptible frequency that reverberated through the remains of her brood. The surviving xenomorphs, scattered across star systems, began to gather, their movements calculated and deliberate. This was the Queen's final strategy. If brute force alone couldn't stop Godzilla, then she would lure him to her, where she controlled every element of the battlefield. Godzilla, standing amidst the debris of the hive ships, sensed the Queen's call. His eyes locked onto the distant planet, the heart of the xenomorph infestation. He didn't hesitate. With a thunderous roar, he propelled himself forward, moving through space toward the Queen's lair. The Galactic Armada, still recovering from the battle, could only watch as Godzilla surged ahead, an unstoppable force on a collision course with the Queen. The Queen's hive world was a nightmarish landscape, a planet overtaken by organic growth, pulsating with life. Massive hives stretched across its surface, teeming with xenomorphs. The air was thick with toxins, the ground covered in acidic rivers that oozed from the Queen's own creations. This was her domain, and she knew every inch of it. Godzilla was powerful, but this planet was designed to be a living death trap for any who dared to challenge her. The Queen was not simply waiting for him, she was preparing. As Godzilla approached, the Queen deployed her most dangerous forces. Massive, evolved xenomorphs, larger and more vicious than any seen before, surged forward. They had been bred for this moment, designed specifically to challenge a creature like Godzilla. The battle erupted across the planet's surface, with Godzilla clashing against these hulking monstrosities. They were fast and relentless, their acid blood burning through his tough hide. Yet, even in the face of such opposition, Godzilla pressed on, tearing through the waves of creatures with savage determination. The Queen watched from the heart of her hive, analyzing every move. She had underestimated Godzilla once, but now she understood his strengths. This time, she wouldn't rely solely on brute force. As Godzilla fought through the swarm, the Queen activated hidden defenses within the planet itself. The ground began to shift and tremble, massive organic tendrils erupting from beneath the surface, wrapping around Godzilla's limbs. These tendrils were part of the planet itself, living extensions of the hive, and they tightened around Godzilla with crushing force. For the first time, Godzilla was slowed. The tendrils squeezed harder, pulling him down, forcing him to the ground. The xenomorphs took advantage of his momentary vulnerability, swarming him in greater numbers. They clung to his massive form, their acid blood burning deeper into his skin. But even as they attacked, Godzilla refused to fall. With a deafening roar, he unleashed a burst of atomic breath, vaporizing the tendrils and sending xenomorphs flying in every direction. The force of the blast carved a deep trench across the planet's surface, reducing entire sections of the hive to ash. But the Queen had anticipated this. She was not simply reacting to Godzilla, she was guiding him, drawing him closer to her lair. Every step Godzilla took was calculated, every attack a test. The Queen was learning, adapting, and now she was ready to face him directly. At the center of the planet, within the largest hive, the Queen emerged. Her form was massive, even by xenomorph standards, her body an amalgamation of biomechanical horror and raw evolutionary perfection. She was the culmination of thousands of generations of genetic refinement, and she was designed to destroy any who stood in her way. Godzilla, the king of monsters, had finally met his match. The Queen charged at Godzilla with terrifying speed, her claws tearing through the air as she struck. Godzilla, already weakened from the battle with her brood, barely blocked the blow in time. The force of the impact sent shockwaves across the battlefield, leveling what was left of the surrounding hive structures. Godzilla countered with a devastating tail swipe, catching the Queen across her midsection. She recoiled, but recovered quickly, launching herself at him again with renewed fury. The two titans clashed, their battle shaking the very core of the planet. The Queen was faster, more agile, her biomechanical limbs lashing out with lethal precision. Godzilla, while slower, was more powerful, each of his strikes carrying enough force to shatter mountains. The Queen's claws tore into his flesh, while his atomic breath scorched her exoskeleton. It was a battle of attrition, and neither side was willing to back down. But the Queen had one final weapon, the planet itself. As Godzilla prepared to unleash another atomic blast, the ground beneath him erupted. Massive tendrils, thicker and stronger than before, burst from the surface, wrapping around his legs and torso. The Queen screeched, her voice echoing across the planet, and the tendrils tightened, pulling Godzilla toward the core of the planet. This was her trap all along. She wasn't just trying to defeat Godzilla, she was trying to bury him, to imprison him deep within her hive where even his power couldn't reach the surface. Godzilla roared in defiance, struggling against the tendrils, but the more he fought, the tighter they became. The Queen closed in, her claws ready for the final strike. But in that moment, something within Godzilla shifted. He tapped into a deeper well of power, an ancient force connected to the very essence of the earth. His dorsal plates began to glow, brighter than they had ever been before. The air around him crackled with energy, and then, with a thunderous explosion, he unleashed the full fury of his atomic power. The blast was cataclysmic, A wave of pure energy that disintegrated the tendrils and obliterated everything in its path. The Queen, caught in the heart of the explosion, shrieked in agony as her body was torn apart. The planet itself began to crumble, unable to withstand the force of Godzilla's attack. The surface fractured, and massive fissures spread across the landscape, swallowing the remnants of the hive. As the dust settled, Godzilla stood victorious, his massive form towering over the destruction. The Queen was gone, her brood annihilated. The Xenomorph threat had been ended, but the cost was immense. The planet, once a thriving hive, was now a lifeless wasteland. Godzilla, battered and bleeding, let out a final roar, a declaration of victory that echoed across the galaxy. The Xenomorph Queen's demise should have marked the end of the conflict, but the consequences of her final actions rippled through the galaxy. In her last moments, the Queen's vast psychic network sent out a distress call, triggering a final, desperate wave of her remaining brood. Though smaller in number, these xenomorphs were scattered across countless worlds, hiding in the ruins of colonies and ships. Now, with their queen gone, they moved toward Earth, driven by the instinct to survive and expand. Back on Earth, humanity had little time to celebrate. The United Earth Defense Council received reports of the incoming swarm, a vengeful last gasp of the xenomorphs that threatened to descend upon the planet. They knew Godzilla had weakened from the galactic battles. Though victorious, his strength was not infinite. Earth would need to rely on more than just its ancient protector to fend off this final onslaught. The Council wasted no time mobilizing Earth's last defenses. Every ship, every missile, every weapon was readied. Humanity had been pushed to its breaking point, but they refused to fall now. Godzilla, still recovering from the brutal battle on the Xenomorph Queen's hive world, returned to Earth's surface. His colossal form moved slower than before, his body scarred and worn, but his presence alone rallied Earth's forces. The sight of him standing tall, even after facing the galaxy's greatest threat, ignited a spark in the hearts of Earth's soldiers. They had a chance, and that was all they needed. The Xenomorph remnants arrived within hours, their numbers fewer than before but still significant. Their organic ships tore through the atmosphere, crashing into Earth's cities and farmlands, spilling out their vicious soldiers. Unlike previous waves, these xenomorphs fought with a frenzied desperation, knowing this was their last stand. They struck hard and fast, and humanity's defenses buckled under the initial assault. The cities that had survived the Galactic Armada's collapse now faced devastation once more. But Earth fought back. Using everything they had learned from previous battles, human forces targeted the xenomorphs with precision. Automated defense drones, piloted remotely by the brightest minds, peppered the invaders with concentrated fire. Mobile strike teams used experimental weapons designed specifically to neutralize the xenomorphs' acidic blood, preventing them from melting through defenses. From civilians to soldiers, every human knew what was at stake. They had nowhere to run. This was the final battle for their home. Amid the chaos, Godzilla roared his defiance, his mighty frame moving through the war-torn streets, obliterating anything that dared to stand in his path. Though he was weakened, the king of monsters fought on, his attacks sending shockwaves that echoed for miles. The xenomorphs attempted to swarm him again, but they lacked the organization and coordination they once had under their queen. Without her guiding presence, they were little more than rabid creatures, attacking without thought or strategy. Even as Earth's forces held the line, the battle took its toll. The cost of survival was steep, with entire districts reduced to rubble. The human resistance was stretched thin, and it became clear that if the xenomorphs reached Earth's central cities, all would be lost. Godzilla alone couldn't protect every corner of the planet. He needed to focus on the largest concentrations of enemies, leaving some of the outskirts vulnerable. Humanity would have to fill the gaps, relying on their own ingenuity to hold the line. In the final hours of the battle, the swarm converged on one critical location, Earth's largest power facility, the center of the planet's energy grid. If the xenomorphs could destroy it, the resulting fallout would cripple Earth's defenses and plunge the planet into darkness. The Council knew this, and so did Godzilla. He turned his attention toward the facility, moving with a renewed urgency despite the wounds that still slowed him down. The last wave of xenomorphs made their push, crashing into the facility's perimeter defenses. Earth soldiers, now down to their final reserves, stood shoulder to shoulder in the face of the overwhelming enemy. They fired with grim determination, knowing full well that this might be the end for them. But just as it seemed the xenomorphs might break through, the ground trembled. Godzilla arrived. In one final, cataclysmic clash, Godzilla tore through the remaining xenomorph forces, his atomic breath obliterating the hive ships that hovered above. The last of the xenomorphs fought with the fury of cornered beasts, but they were no match for Godzilla's raw, unstoppable power. With every strike, with every roar, he drove them back, until there were none left. Earth soldiers, battered and bruised, watched in awe as Godzilla stood triumphant once more. The last of the xenomorph threat had been extinguished. As the dust settled, humanity began to take stock of the devastation. The battle had left scars across the planet, but they were still standing. For the first time since the Galactic Armada's disastrous discovery of the Xenomorph Queen, Earth could finally breathe. The Xenomorph plague, which had torn through the stars and threatened to consume everything, had been stopped. Godzilla had fulfilled his ancient role as the planet's protector once again, but it was not his victory alone. Humanity, though fragile and flawed, had fought with everything they had, and in the end, they had prevailed. Godzilla, his duty fulfilled, let out a final, resounding roar. The sound carried across the skies, a declaration to the universe that Earth was not to be trifled with. And then, without a word or a command, he began his long journey back to the sea. He had no need for praise or recognition. Godzilla had done what he had always done, protected the Earth. In the aftermath of the battle, the United Earth Defense Council convened to plan the long road to recovery. Cities would be rebuilt, lives would be mourned, but there was a newfound sense of unity among the survivors. They had faced extinction and emerged on the other side, stronger and more determined than ever before. Humanity, with all its flaws, had proven that they could stand alongside gods and monsters and hold their own. Godzilla's silhouette faded into the horizon as he returned to the depths, where he would rest until the Earth needed him again. And though they hoped that day would never come, they knew now that, no matter the threat, they would not face it alone. The Xenomorphs had come to destroy Earth, but in the end, it was Earth, and its ancient protector, that had stood victorious.